Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of SNEED-CAST. I'm here with Ken and Q, and today we're going to be talking about the importance of EOS on small businesses like ours. So, Ken, if you can start us off with what is EOS?
Ooh, right, that's a mouthful. EOS, we'll start with, is an acronym it stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. And it's based or kind of was formulated or developed by a gentleman by the name of Gino Wickman. He has a book that lays out the groundwork or the foundation for the EOS for the system called Traction. Highly recommend that out there to get started for any of those interested in the system. After we get done talking here, or if you've heard of it in the past, definitely give that book a read. And then from there's some other materials as well. But essentially, other than what are the words, EOS, what does that mean? Entrepreneur Operating System. And the way that I can just dumb it down or just simplify it the most is that it's like Windows for your business or for your people or both, right? So your computer has an operating system. We won't talk about Apples. We'll talk about real computers. So your computer, PC, laptop's got an operating system, be it Mac OS or Windows. That is what runs your computer. It keeps all of it's what runs your apps. Stores your data. Everything else is organized through that system. So if you can wrap your head around what Windows does for your computer, that essentially, in my world, is an analogy for what EOS will do for your business.
So with EOS, whenever we first started, I remember you had me work on some posters that had like core values. It had some like main objectives by which we like run by. So how much of that was EOS?
All those posters, those are all derived from the EOS process. So with EOS, there's 6 main components that basically create the system that are vision, data, process, issues, people, and then traction. And so those different things we have on our posters, and I'm going to cheat here for a second. Make sure I take my microphone with me. We have our posters outside the conference room here. Core focus. That's on. This is part of the vision aspect. Is your core focus is going to be your niche and your purpose, and essentially, kind of like to nail this down, right? This was one of the things that our company struggled with in the first couple of years, is that everybody was working hard, everybody's doing their thing. Back then there was 4 or 5 of us. Megan was rocking and rolling with order fulfillment operations, and Charles was rocking and rolling with tech support, and myself on the sales and marketing side, and of course Brian. But the one thing that was kind of missing was the direction we're all headed in. So we may all have been sitting in our little rowboats and all rolling really hard, but not through necessarily out of any kind of intent or anything. But we weren't necessarily always rowing in the same direction, and that's a big part of EOS is with that vision. And you do this on a quarterly, annual basis as you sit down there and talk about what that vision is. What is it? What direction are we going in with the company? We got to be able to kind of climb up to the top of the tree and look and make sure we're at the top of the sail post or whatever you want to call it, and make sure we're all rolling in the same direction. Otherwise, we may just end up kind of going in circles or kind of staying in the same spot. So that was a really long-winded answer to your question, Quentin. But some other things we have on those posters, of course, you mentioned earlier, core values, 3 uniques, and some other things related to marketing as well. But yeah, the core values, that's an interesting and fun exercise in my opinion. The way we went about it is essentially we went in this room here on that whiteboard. We just basically sat down and wrote down all of our, I don't know if favorite is the right word, but most admirable attributes or characteristics of everybody in the organization at the time. But whether that was both from employees to individual members of the management team, et cetera, what were those? So we literally just had a list of all the different things, and then we played a game of, what is it? kill or combine, I guess, right? So we there were a lot of them that were kind of similar related, so we kind of combined those into one, and then went through and kind of knocked off because you have to. I think you're limited to like between 3 and 6 according to the book, right? So then we had to kind of go through that process of nailing down what are the true like kind of core values of this group.
So it kind of gave you all the structure, but as far as the bones go, and as far as like what's actually there, like you guys came up with that, they didn't give you values that you guys should want to have. It's like it's truly what y'all thought of, right?
That's a great question. No, yeah, absolutely. There's no the book doesn't give you. No, the book is very much of a how-to, and then it's very much of a long-form essay. You fill in the blank. There are no answers in the book. It just tells you how to find the answer. But yeah, exactly. It does have some examples. Gino does a good job throughout the book, pulling anecdotes from his experiences and consulting and working with other businesses and whatnot. So there certainly are anecdotes and examples in there. But it's not to say, oh, these are the types of, like, your core values should be this or should be along those lines. Like I said, it was very much for us, it was a matter of deriving it from the group that we had at the time. And then what is it that we feel like makes this group, as good and strong as it is. And so that's kind of how we went through that process there.
I think it's interesting too, because like it's like there's like a certain aversion to feeling like super corporate, but I think that like stuff like this does really help a lot, because I feel like for me, like whenever I started, like Ken, you and Brian had worked together for like what, upwards of 10 years together.
Since 09 was when he hired me the first time.
And then same with Charles and that. And so like I think it's easy for y'all to like have the same mind almost, but like it's a little more difficult for like someone like me or Alexa just jumping in. Like, you guys have told us what you want, but it's also nice to like look at what we have within the EOS and like, but okay, this is our core like value chart, so I can operate under these certain circumstances. Like if that makes sense. So like there is a lot of value there, in my personal opinion.
Well, that's good to hear.
From an employee perspective, like when we first started, I think one of the most beneficial parts of EOS is knowing how our department kind of affects everyone else. Like in our weekly meetings, right? On Friday, we go through not only like sales and marketing, but we also go through like tech, we go through shipping and handling. So it's interesting to see how it all ties together. And again, like, since we work in marketing, we kind of get stuck in our little bubble, like in our day-to-day tasks. But again, like we're adding on to a bigger picture. And I feel like EOS and our weekly meetings like definitely help clear it up, or like help us get that insight that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really, good hearing all that good stuff from you guys. We love it, obviously, EOS on the management side, so it's always nice to hear that the employees like it too. Real quick plug on that too. There is also another book. We have several copies here. Another book from the organization, from the EOS group. I don't know if Gino wrote it or somebody from his team wrote it, but it's called, I believe, What the Heck is EOS? And it's a kind of an abridged version, kind of like EOS for dummies, if you will. I don't say that because it's for employees. Dad joke, sorry. No, seriously though, that is a really just abridged version of the system that you can, if it's something you're interested in doing for your company, it's a great thing to give to your employees, because your employees are like, what is this thing? Why are they in there meeting once a week? And you guys may have come in after the fact, but when we first rolled out EOS, I can't remember if we were still doing this hot and heavy, but like the first month or so, maybe first 2 months, I mean, we were in here twice a week. Actually, the first few weeks, we were in here every single day, going through that book together, myself, Charles, Megan, and Brian, trying to implement all these things. I always say this because I have a lot of favorite aspects of EOS, but truly one of my favorite aspects of EOS is the right person, right seat aspect, and that comes inside of the people component. When you think about those 6 components, right, of EOS, you kind of like, this makes sense in terms of, you had to, from a business perspective, like what are the 6 main components of a business? Vision, data, process, issues, people, traction. Like those are all, in my opinion, is very logical. Those are all the main components of a business as well. And within that people portion is that concept of the right person, the right seat. Is that not only do you want to make sure you hire the right people, but you want to make sure that they're sitting in a seat, and by the seat, it's their job position, their role, their responsibilities, and that seat matches their skill set, it matches their desires, it matches their aspirations, and it's their unique ability. And so that in terms of hiring, and also how we do our quarterly reviews and everything else, it's all based around those what's called the GWC: get it, want it, capacity to do it, and then core values. You want to make sure that, and this, I saw something recently. I'm rambling a little bit here, but I promise I'll tie it all together. I believe it was Mark Cuban who had done an interview recently about this in terms of hiring and getting the right people. And more so than skills, knowledge, experience, or anything else, it was about a cultural fit in his experience. Is you got to skills and the other things you can train, teach, and do all that stuff. If you don't have somebody that's a good core values fit within your organization, that's it's just not gonna be a good thing. So again, right person, right seat. So when we bring in people, and when I was interviewing you guys and gal, that was literally like one of the things is a core values based interview. It's a matter of, and I'm not very good at interviews, do my best, but it's trying to create questions that are structured around core values. Like how can I find out examples of quitting? Like quitting, give me an example of something you're proud of in your background. What are you most proud of that you've worked on? Alexa, give me an example. Another one of our core values is never settle. What's an example of a challenge that you've been faced with, whether it's personal or it's a job interview, can't say personal. A professional incident you've been through that, challenged you, that to the brink of quitting, but you overcame it. Give me, those types of things. So again, going back to the EOS, you can never quite tell. It's a 1 hour conversation to try to get sense from somebody, but you want to have somebody that's, more than half core values fit. And do they get it? Do they understand the position? Do they want it? Do they want to do the job that's entailed? And on the get it side too, not just do they understand the position, but do they understand how it fits into the greater whole of the department as well as the organization? And then capacity to do it. Do they have the skill set? Do they have the knowledge? Do they have the wherewithal, bandwidth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to do it? So that is not only when we're hiring, we're looking through that lens, but then when we do sit down and do our quarterlies and everything else, it's always just making sure that we're on track there. Because you could have somebody that's super brilliant and super smart and everything else. I'll pick on you, Alexa. If I came to you tomorrow and say, hey, you know what? We're really struggling in tech support, so I'm going to need you to go over and sit over behind Matthew and Samuel and start taking tech support calls. Could you do it? Probably. I think you could work your way through it. Do you understand the importance of it? Sure. Of course you do. Now, do you want to do it? No, you don't. And neither do I. I'll kind of. Quentin's been trying to talk now. I don't know if there's a camera. Quentin's been trying to pull his mic up to say something for the last few minutes. I'll kind of tie a bow on it and let him ask his question.
No, I mean, I was just more so just fiddling, but I guess how do you guys set the standard for it? Because you guys have those, because you have your own executive L10s, and then we have our own marketing L10, and then you have one with sales too, I assume, and then that goes through every department. So are there certain points that need to be hit throughout every single one of those that come from those top level, or how does that work?
That's a good question. So one thing this ties into the traction component is the L10 meeting. As far as I recall from the book and everything else, L10. What does that mean? Where does it come from? It's basically just meant to be a goal. The goal is, I think we've all been, anybody that's been in the professional environment for long enough, meetings in general in the business world, there's plenty of memes out there about it, and at least, a lot of people think that at times meetings can be wasteful, or people start tangents or they get sidetracked or whatever else. So the point of having an L10 agenda, the L10 meeting, it's a very specific agenda. You stick to the agenda. You stay on track and you work your way through that agenda. And there's certain components of it that you touch on every single week. One of those that helps determine, what are the things that need to be talked about. It comes from the vision. The vision determines what are our goals, what are we trying to aspire in the next, 1 year, 3 years, 10 years. And then we break that down into quarters every 90 days. And then within that, so in order to get to our 10-year vision, where do we need to be in 3 years? Where do we need to be in 1 year? Okay, well, where do we need to be at the end of the year? Now let's break down that quarterly, and then what are the quarterly projects that need to be done to kind of move us along in those directions? That then comes from the data component, which is where you come up with the scorecard. The scorecard is very much what dictates a lot of things that happen, right? So the scorecard at the executive level or at the management level is the top, I think it's 10 to 15 numbers that you come up with, or criteria, KPIs, whatever term you want to throw in there. That basically in the book, the phrasing they use, it's basically the key components of information that if you were stuck, stranded on an island, with no means of communication whatsoever, all you had was that scorecard. And you could see those metrics on that scorecard. What are the top 10 to 15 metrics you need to see about the business to know everything is okay? Or I need to get off this island and I need to go fix some stuff, right? So that's the concept of the scorecard, that data component, because data is black and white. There is no this or that or whatever. It's just pure data, doesn't lie, unless you're in politics. But no, that's what that comes from. So then to answer your question, right? So that's a big part of that L10 meeting. We go through the data. Do we flush out, are there any numbers that are off? Are there any issues here that need to be discussed? And then you go through the progression with the rocks, the quarterly projects. Are we on track with those? And then you go through those, and that ultimately leads to the back portion of the meeting is called the IDS section. Identify, discuss, and solve, which is issues. Again, another component is issues. You don't have business. If you don't have issues, you don't have business. So that's just... We were just talking about one off mic that we won't get into, but that's just the nature of the thing. If you're doing business, you're interacting with human beings and other things out in the world, then things are going to come up. So that essentially, that L10 is very crucial. It's the heartbeat. They even call it a meeting pulse. It's the heartbeat of the business is what happens inside of that meeting. And then, yes, to answer your question then, Quentin, here it comes. It's actually bidirectional. So we have our L10s down here, departmental L10s, and then, of course, you have your management L10s. And sometimes there's a discussion that happens up here that then gets funneled down. Maybe it's a support thing. So Charles takes it to his team, and then they discuss it in their L10. Or it's sales thing, and then we talk about it in sales meeting, etc. Or it can also go up. I mean, if Alexa brings an issue to the table in our marketing L10, I'm struggling with... I got too much stuff on my plate, there's blah, 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 I need some help or whatever. Then it's like, okay, well, then let me take this issue with me to the leadership team, and then we can address it there to see what the company can do. Again, very long-winded answer, but I hope that would kind of explain kind of in general how those things tie together.
I think a question that I have, and this is more so like for our startup companies, since we work with so many, and since we were a startup company at some point as well, at what point do you know that you have to integrate like an EOS system?
That's a great question. If you ask the authors of the book, they'll say as soon as you start. Because that's the great thing about EOS. The EOS, and they use this, they talk about, they have businesses around the world that are as small as 3 employees. That was the example. The smallest company they know that's running EOS is 3 employees. You think, like, do you really need this system? There's only 3 of you. But it's, again, it just kind of helps keep you going in the correct direction. You identify what you're working towards, and then you just kind of keep that direction. But it's also scalable. You have large corporations with hundreds of employees that also run and utilize EOS. So it's really a matter of when you realize that you're going in too many different directions, especially as a business owner. And I can't speak to that. I'm not a business owner, but just from conversations I've had and books I've read and also conversations with Mr. Sneed, is that, and it comes up with a book, is delegate and elevate, is that a business owner will typically, when they start their business, they have their hands in everything. So did Brian. When Brian started, he was all by himself. He was Megan. He was Charles. He was me. He was the copywriter. He was the YouTube video guy. I mean, he did everything. And then as things grew, is like, okay, now I need to take this piece, sales and marketing, order fulfillment. Let me get somebody to do order fulfillment. And then it's just about taking your hand off the wheel and having that trust and finding the right person, putting them in the right seat, and then giving them the accountability of the different things that they need to be taken care of therein. And ultimately, the goal is to eventually, an entrepreneur, one of their greatest strengths, and this is my personal belief as well as it comes out of the book, is and I'm fascinated with entrepreneurs. I have been for a long time, but one of their greatest strengths is their vision, in their creativity and their vision, their ability to see the future and then tackle the future with an idea, or we want to do this, or we want to do that, or let's try this or that. And that's what you want to do is you want to be able to you want your entrepreneur, you want to have and it's literally a seat within EOS is called the visionary. Well, that's typically your business owners who is driving the vision for the business and driving the vision for the future. And then below that, you have an integrator, which is the person that is responsible, for keeping the vision manageable, but also then integrating that vision and making that vision come to fruition. So those are kind of some of those top level components of EOS, and then it all just kind of like shakes down from there. So, but ultimately, like, every business should be running on EOS, if you ask my opinion. I mean, I don't think I've never talked to anybody that uses EOS that has regretted it. And I also see people posting on LinkedIn that use it, that utilize it. And whether you are perfect at implementing it, we're not perfect. I know we have some flaws within the way we run EOS, and maybe we have some of our own tweaks to it, because, I mean, there's no such thing as a cookie cutter thing. But I think ultimately in terms of getting the right people in place within your organization, and then making sure all those people are all working towards the same goal, I've never really come across something that works quite as succinctly as EOS does in that regard.
Yeah, no, so I had never worked at a company that implemented EOS, but now having worked at one, I think it'd be hard to go back to anything else. Just because EOS makes it, again, so clear to see the bigger picture, how marketing is affecting sales, orders, all of that good stuff, as well as like providing a clear path to being able to communicate our needs, like from our team to not only you, Ken, as our manager, but also then you going on our behalf and being able to talk to Brian or all of our higher ups. So again, I just feel like it makes everything so much more organized, and I'm the kind of person that thrives on organization and structure, as we all know.
You?
Yeah.
The most organized person I've ever met.
Oh yeah, so no, big fan of EOS over here.
What about you, Quentin? I know you actually. I remember we talked about this the year previous employment. They did some EOS work there too, right?
Yeah, so they were big on L attends. So whenever I first got that here, I was like, oh, okay, we're doing this, which it's great. Like, I think L attends are a great way to structure a meeting. And I also think from here, and also at my old job, like, transparency is very, very nice. And I think EOS drives a lot of that. Like, I never feel like I don't know what's going on. I believe it was probably a year ago, like, y'all sat us down and gave us the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, and that felt nice to, like, know that, and know that there are plans being drawn up, and, like, that, like, there is a certain future that you guys are working towards. And it sounds simple, but it's so nice to have.
You're absolutely right. For me, I've confessed this to y'all before. Apologize on that audio tap there. I suffer, as most people do, in different ways, from imposter syndrome a lot, and specifically as it relates to being a manager and being a quote unquote vice president of a small company. But I frequently have that thing where I feel like I'm just playing a version of The Sims, but it's like for the office. Like, I just feel like, but like EOS for me, that's where EOS has been huge. Is just it helps kind of like, okay, this is the structure. This is how you run a business, and you just follow this platform. Everything rocks and rolls. And there's two things I haven't touched on yet before we close out. Like, if you think about it, in some of what y'all just said really tapped into this, is that entrepreneurial operating system. The biggest thing in there is the E, entrepreneurial, right person, right seat. I try to tell this to everybody as much as I can, is that within the business, there are a microcosm of smaller individual businesses. And the point of EOS is to inspire and nurture nurture that entrepreneurial mindset within every employee. So that Quentin, you're our digital media specialist. Well, digital media is your own little business within the business. So we want you to have that entrepreneurial mindset. Nobody knows that seat like you know that seat. Nobody in this company knows what it takes to sit in that seat, what it takes to do what you need to do with YouTube, edit videos, edit podcasts, make us look great, everything else. You know what it takes to drive that seat. So you know better than I do what you need in that seat and how, what the vision should be, what the future of that should be and things of that nature. So it's a matter of, again, inspiring and nurturing that entrepreneurial spirit within each employee, within their seat, to say, hey, this is your business. You tell me how we as the company, we'll tell you what we're looking like, what our deliverables are. But then it's a matter of you saying, okay, here are the deliverables I have to achieve. How can I do this? And then how can I also constantly improve it? That's another concept of EOS, is that everybody is, for the most part, and this is what we were doing before EOS came into play. We were all working in the business. And we were all busy working in the business, but nobody was working on the business. And a big part of EOS is just through delegate and elevate and having the right people in the right seats and making sure that the bandwidth is good to go, but making sure that everybody's got a little bit of time. Of course, the higher up in the ladder you are, the more time you have to work on the business as opposed to in the business. That's a different thing. But everybody should just have a little bit of that, even Brent in order fulfillment, how can I make this better? How can I make this process better? How can I make this department better? How can I make my seat better? Et cetera, et cetera. So that's like a really big thing for me within it. And then, of course, briefly just kind of careened over it earlier was those, what I said, quarterly projects, or what are so affectionately called rocks, right, within EOS. So we all have rocks. The company has rocks. Each individual has rocks. Sometimes an individual's rock is a direct correlation to the company rock or the actual company rock, depending on what we're working on, right? And my favorite thing about rocks is it's a way of identifying priorities. And so there's multiple videos out there, examples, you can look it up, and I'm going to do my best to summarize it real quick. Quentin's nodding his head. He probably knows what I'm referring to, but it's a college professor, and he has a big giant glass jar. And he talks about if you fill it with the sand first, and then a little bit of grains or granules, and then pebbles, and then by the time you get towards closer to the time, 5 times put your bigger rocks in there, there's no room for those rocks. But if you take the bigger rocks and you start with those, you put those in first, and then you put in a little bit of sand and the pebbles and everything else, the sand and the pebbles will find their way. They will fit inside of the jar or around the bigger rocks. And ultimately the point is that the rocks are the priority. Work on the rocks first, and all the minutia of the business and all the different things will fill in around it. So those are just my last 2 little things I wanted to make sure we touch on before we close this episode. As you guys can see, I'm a big EOS proponent.
Big fan.
Big fan. Gino, big fan. If you're out there.
Alrighty. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us for this episode of SNEED-CAST. Like always, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and just know that SNEED-CAST is now streaming on all of your favorite streaming platforms. So make sure to give us a subscribe just to keep up to date with all of our great content. Also, if there are any topics that you'd like to see us talk about here on the show, drop them down below, and we'll get back to that.
Yeah. No, we're good. Rock and roll, everybody. Okay. Go buy a copy of Traction, and Gino, give me some commissions.
Bye, all.
Bye.